This is Larry Jordan, the author of the Focal Press book, Adobe CS Production Premium for Final Cut Editors. In this power-up tutorial, I want to show you how to do rotoscoping. The image on the left represents where we're starting, a polar bear in front of the concrete walls of the Toronto Zoo. The image on the right is where we want to end up, a polar bear as the closing shot of a Save the Animals commercial. But to get there requires more than Final Cut. I can do the composite in Final Cut, but I can't do the rotoscoping. Rotoscoping is the process of removing portions of an image one frame at a time. We can do this in a variety of software, but one that I want to show you today is Photoshop. So let's open this video inside Photoshop. And because we need to see a timeline, we'll go up to the Window menu, go down and show the animation timeline. As we move through here, we can see the polar bear is turning, and it's standing in front of the concrete wall. We need to get rid of the concrete wall. There's a variety of selection tools available to us inside Photoshop, but the one that I want to illustrate for you is this one, called the Quick Selection tool. Notice there's a clear difference in color between the background and the polar bear. When you have a clear difference between the foreground and the background, the Quick Selection tool works great. Simply click, hold, and drag, and notice that it's now set a selection area around that part of the background that we want to get rid of. We selected the part that we dragged in. Hit the Delete key, then do the same thing up here, hit the Delete key, and do the same thing over here. Hit the Delete key. Now let's move down to the animation timeline. Click to move to the next frame, and do it again. For me, I tend to want to make sure that I'm selecting exactly the right material, so I'll delete the selection marquee, Command D, and drag and select again. Drag and hit delete, drag and hit delete, drag and hit delete. Again, Command D to make that disappear, and we'll do it one more time. Click, hold, and drag, delete, click, hold, and drag, delete, and click, hold, and drag, delete. Now we've done 3 frames of a total of about 60, and watching me do the rest of them is going to be as much fun as watching grass grow or fungus slowly take over your refrigerator. Not the most fun in the world, so I'll spare you the rest of it, but I want to point out a couple of things. When you're using the Quick Selection tool, you'll sometimes have a few pixels right around where those different sections were selected that you may need to clean up. And you want to look very closely at your edges. For instance, the back end of the bear was not always being selected, so I needed to do 2 passes. One to get rid of these little floating pixels up here, and to clean up the tail quarters of the bear to make sure that I didn't have the concrete appearing on some frames and not appearing on others. It took me about a minute to do 3 frames, which meant that it took about 20 minutes to do this 2-second clip. So rotoscoping is time-consuming. But sometimes, if you haven't shot the bear in front of a green screen, for instance, it's your only option when you want to put the foreground in front of a different background. Now we need to get it out of Photoshop, and to do that, we go up to File, we go down to Export, and we render video. As this dialog shows up, I want to illustrate something. Notice that we have what's called an alpha channel. The alpha channel, which is simply geek speak for transparency, is we want to make sure that when we export this, we retain the transparency in the background. Otherwise, if you don't, Photoshop will fill it in with black. So as we look at the render video dialog, there's a couple of areas to look at. The first is, what set of frames do we want to export? Because I specifically created a clip that's exactly the frames that I want to use in my video, I'm going to output all frames. You could also specify a range, or by adjusting the in or the out in the timeline, you could have a selection area, like an in and out inside Final Cut. The next is to set the video format. To do that, we want to make sure we set it to QuickTime Movie and click Settings. If you're working with Final Cut 6, notice I'm clicking the Settings button again. If you're working with Final Cut 6, you want to make sure that you output using the Animation codec. If you're working with Final Cut 7, you want to output using the ProRes 4x4 codec. Animation and ProRes are the only 2 formats that support alpha channels in video. Whether you're using ProRes, which I'm going to do here, or Animation, the next step is to be sure the compressor pop-up is set to millions of colors plus. Millions of colors means no alpha channel. Millions of colors plus includes the alpha channel. So you want to make sure the alpha channel is included by including millions of colors plus. When we click OK, we don't apply any filters to our video inside Photoshop, and we want to make sure the size remains set to current so that we output the same size that the video went in, and click OK. Although Photoshop does play audio, it doesn't export it, so that's always grayed out, and we don't want to set it for internet streaming because we're bringing it back into Final Cut. So the only setting we need to make is the video setting, and click OK. When you're including the alpha channel, there's one more decision you get to make, and that is how you want it rendered. Straight or unmatted is generally the best choice, but if your background leans toward dark, it may look better if you export pre-multiplied with black. If your background is lighter, then it may look better pre-multiplied with white. I've done a test with all three, and with this particular image it looks best as I set it to straight, which is the default. Once that's done, you click Render, and it will automatically render this in the video format that you specify. To save ourselves some time, and so you don't have to watch me do this over and over again, I've gone through the clip and removed the background on all 60 frames. I then imported this. This is the clip called Polar Bear Clean that you see down here in the browser, and I loaded it on top of V2. When the clip was loaded, it automatically sensed the alpha channel, but to make sure that you've got it sensed correctly, go to the Modify menu, go down to Alpha Type, and make sure the alpha type matches the way that you did the output. In this case, we did it with a straight alpha channel, and notice how much cleaner the edges are. And if you compare that with, say, alpha type black, notice that now we've got sort of this halo around the bear, which we don't want. So it's important to match the alpha type in Final Cut with the format that Photoshop exports. And there we've got it. Just to take a look at this, if we type Option P, there's the bear turning and looking at us. Option P, giving us a nice look and a freeze frame at the end that we can use for our closing spot of the polar bear staring off into the future and looking at us to drive the point home. A much improved shot. Rotoscoping is a very powerful tool when you need to change the background and weren't able to shoot it against a green screen. My name is Larry Jordan, and thanks for watching this Power Up tutorial.